Hey everybody, welcome to the Urbstead. I'm Ben, and today I'm going to show you a really quick video on how we're going to make fertilizer tea here in the garden. This fertilizer tea is sort of like a poor man's chemical fertilizer. This is going to be using resources that are all found here on the Urbstead, and we are going to implement them here in our own garden beds to try and make that system more of a closed loop rather than having to buy more and more inputs from external sources. Okay? So let's get into it. In today's video, we are going to try two fertilizer teas. First one is going to be using the garden waste, which is just going to be me weeding the gardens. That definitely needs to happen, and using those weeds in this tea. And the second option here is going to be chicken manure tea, and that is going to be just like it sounds, using fresh chicken manure. I'm going to steep it, try and draw out some really good nutrients, and we are going to use that on the soil. So I'm going to let you guys watch a little bit of a time lapse of me grabbing those two sets of resources. For the greens, we're going to have to chop them up a little bit, which you might be seeing now. And that chopping process is just going to help get those nutrients out of those plants faster. So smaller bits are going to be easier to release all of the nutrients that they have, as opposed to bigger pieces. The really great thing about these teas is that they're super simple to make. They're also very inexpensive to make, which is why we're doing it. Another note for those who might be questioning if these things are actually useful, I was able to dig up some research information on the chicken manure tea. Now, the volumes of manure as well as the volumes of water were much higher than what we are going to do here, but the principle, I believe, is the same. Out back, bud. The findings of this research paper in a greenhouse study using many different growing mediums was that the chicken manure tea was on par to the performance of chemical fertilizer, which is really exciting because we have tons of chicken manure. Well, okay, maybe not actually a ton. We have a lot of chicken manure. And to know that it could be just as useful or close to as useful as chemical fertilizer is a big win. Unfortunately, on the garden waste tea side of things, there's not a whole lot of technical data. If you do a search on Google for this sort of information, a lot of what you're going to get is anecdotal. It's going to be, yeah, I've been using this tea in my garden for years and I have always had great plants because of it. Well, is it exactly because of it? I mean, probably, maybe. But do we have specific chemical values or fertilizer values like NPK values on each type of weed that's going into this tea? Yeah, I don't know. Maybe. I couldn't find anything. But the idea is that you're taking these weeds like dandelions for me. Also, you're taking plants like comfrey. These plants that have very deep taproots that are gathering nutrients from farther down in the ground than your vegetables will be. You have them pushing those nutrients up into the leaves, and then essentially you're harvesting that green or the entire plant full of all those nutrients, and then you are extracting some of them and putting them back into that same soil to be reused by the vegetables rather than the weeds. So in this case, you get multiple benefits. You get to remove weeds from your garden, which also increases the amount of nutrients for your veggies. And you're taking some of those nutrients that were already used and giving them back to the veggies. Okay, so here we have them. These were finished up yesterday, and now they're sitting. And as of right now, my thought is that we're going to let these sit for potentially 1 to 2 weeks. And the reason for that is the longer the time, the more of those nutrients that are going to be pulled out of those leaves. Here's just a note or a disclaimer for anyone who wants to try this. It's going to stink. And the reason for that is because what is going to happen in here is some amount of anaerobic digestion, rotting, and those bacteria, as opposed to compost, which is aerobic, these ones stink, like bad. Like they'll smell like straight up sewer. And so, a word for the wise, put a lid on it. What the lid will also do is will keep these water sources, open water sources, from being bug infested. Other than that, there's not a whole lot else to do. We're going to let these things sit, and in those 2 weeks, or at the end of those 2 weeks or a week, we're going to come back and we are going to try and do our best at straining off all of the solids. Now, this is pretty important because when you put it in your watering can, you don't want it to just clog up the entire watering can. Pour the solids into your compost pile or bury them in your yard. That part is pretty much up to you. I will be burying mine in the yard because, again, it's just more organic matter. But that's really it. We're going to let these sit, and I'm going to forget about it, and then I'm going to come back out and eventually strain these, and I'll just put them in the bucket. I'll probably water this down either 1 to 2 or 1 to 5 with just plain water. And then I'm going to pour it around the base of all the plants that are out here at that time. And we're going to see how it does this season. I'm going to try and make this a rotating thing where I just keep making new tea and letting it simmer and keep using it. So thank you for coming by today. I'm Ben with the Urbstead. This has been a really short and sweet video. I hope that you can take away something really useful for your own garden this year. I'm also hoping that this can be a budget saver for you. I know a lot of us are in a place where money is tight. We are, obviously, since I left my job. And a lot of our initiatives this year, we are trying to do on a budget basis. This also does something to your mentality about gardening when you do that. And personally, I think it is for the best. I think it gives you an eye that is more keen to find ways to use the waste products that you produce in the garden somewhere else in the garden instead of having to purchase something. So that's just food for thought. But anyways, thank you for coming by. Leave a like down below and subscribe if you haven't already. Share this video with a friend if you know someone who is starting their own garden journey and is looking for different ways to maybe utilize the things that they have in their yard. If you have weeds growing in your yard, you should give this a try too. One thing I know is both of these fertilizer teas would be excellent ways to feed container plants. So if you do have a container garden or you grow lots of plants in pots, these are going to be very helpful tools for you in your own garden. Tell me down below if you've ever done this and what was your success or not success like. What did it look like for you? Thank you again. And as always, grow on.